All right, welcome in. While other contenders are going all in for running back stars like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, the Cowboys, they're rolling the dice on one of the cheapest running back rooms in the entire league. The rankings do not paint a pretty picture. No real money spent again. They haven't taken a running back before day 3 since Zeke in 2016. So the question is, did Dallas just outsmart the NFL, or are they about to pay the price for devaluing another position way too much? Let's do this.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about them Cowboys?
Yeah, buddy, I'm Gavin Dawson from 105.3 The Fan, Cowboys flagship station in Dallas-Fort Worth, 2 to 7 every weekday. And joining me now, as always, is the former all-academic SEC guard at Kentucky. It's my man, New Bear. How the heck are you, buddy?
I feel like, I got the hole in the roof on the shelf. I feel like, I got, so God can watch his team play, so God can watch us do this podcast. I mean, we're all in, man. Let's go.
I think that's the new stadium, actually. You need to get the curtains in there. Your second half of a 325 start, and Dak Prescott's looking out into the sun trying to find a wide receiver. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The show brought to you by Harbor Lights and Elements Massage in Frisco. And we'll get you more details on those guys in just a little bit. So here's sort of the premise, New Bear. Let me go ahead and share the screen. I go back to a story from January of 2024 in the Dallas Morning News, done by Michael Gelkin, who has since left his post, but this was one of his last articles, and it was terrific. I'm always thinking about this, but inside this story, the premise that he lays out is they got frustrated, that they had Zeke, they had Tony Pollard, and when they got to the playoffs, they were averaging 3.1, 3.3, 3.9 an attempt. I've talked about on this channel how in 3 of Dak's 5 playoff losses, he was the most effective runner on the team. So the Cowboys decided we're doing too much here. We're spending a lot. We're not getting the production. And in 3 of those years, they barely got 1,000 yards out of Zeke and Tony Pollard. So you have that, New Bear, but you also have the fact that in the same 24-month period, the Niners added McCaffrey went straight to the Super Bowl. The Eagles add Barkley go straight to the Super Bowl. It's $18 to $20 million. The Ravens, by the way, best offense out there, grabbed Derrick Henry. The Lions got Jahmyr Gibbs and had a two-headed running back, just monster situation. So, I mean, the question is, they're going cheap, right? Is it brilliant or is it negligent, my man?
Well, they're also doing one of the things they love to do, right? Which is go after highly thought after, if not highly sought after once upon a time, if not highly sought after in present day. Javonte Williams, let's not forget, third running back in his draft class behind Najee Harris and Etienne. And it was him and Carter, the college teammates, who's still kicking around as well. And those guys were gangbusters. I mean, they had games with over 500 yards and set records together, just lighting the ACC on fire. And the knee injury changed everything because he had a very, very promising rookie season in Denver. Miles Sanders is a guy, just a few years ago, we were talking as the same kind of engine type of player in the Philly offense that Saquon really took to the next level. What's fascinating is to look at how some of these other teams are spending in, and even if it doesn't quite work all the way, like with Joe Mixon last year in Houston, because the numbers were about the same as what they were in Cincinnati for him, and you were paying him substantially more, is that it offers protection for the – and what I think Dallas is also saying right now, what they're signaling to the rest of the league, is that we believe in Dak, much like the Patriots once believed in Tom Brady, that we can just kind of roll anybody in there and he'll figure it out if he's healthy.
Yeah, I think they are doing that. And one of the issues that I've had is, when you're trying to build a championship team, I don't think you can look at any position on your team and say we can get by here. I think they're clearly doing it at safety. They're kind of doing it at linebacker. I mean, other than Leighton Vander Esch, first-round pick from 2019, like what have they really invested at linebacker? I guess they tried for Micah Parsons, ends up being an edge. They didn't come back to that with anything meaningful. So, I think they put running back in this group of, hey, we're tied against the cap every year, and we got to pick some positions we're not going to pay. And I wonder how big of a mistake that is if you're doing that at running back. The extreme, analytics crew will say running back doesn't matter. I think on the other side of that, you have people that feel like, oh no, we should draft a running back in the top 10. We need a great running back so much. I'm willing to use a pick that could be a quarterback, could be a tackle, could be an edge, a corner, a wide receiver. I'd rather use that on running back, and I don't want to do that. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And once again, I feel like the Cowboys are letting that pendulum swing because good running teams have an advantage right now, and that defenses have been trying to figure out how to stop the passing game so extreme for the last 15 years. The coaches aren't ready for the run, and the personnel isn't ready to stop the run. So I think if you're not taking advantage of that in a meaningful way, like they did in 2016, didn't they? In 2014 and 2016, their best chances to win the Super Bowl of the last 15 years, they had great running back play. So I don't know how you can be serious about what you see in the NFL, what you saw in the playoffs last year, and think we can get by at this spot.
It's funny because I'm not saying Dak's Tom Brady, and I'm not saying that. Even though I did show a trajectory where George Pickens could have a stat line that looks a lot like Randy Moss, what's really fascinating is when you look at super teams, greatest offenses of all time. Go back like you were talking about just throwing the ball all over the place and really spreading folks out like the Patriots did in 2007. You know who the leading running back was on that team? Lawrence Maroney. And then You're talking about Sammy Morris and the traditional, Kevin Falk third down back roll. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because Maroney didn't even have 200 carries. You had Welker, you had Moss. We're still 3 years away from Gronk. We're still.
So are you saying the Cowboys could use a running back by committee approach and have success? I don't know if you can replicate that. I think you need top end talent like only 15 or 20 guys have. And if you're trying to throw 3 guys at it, you better have a Brady.
Right.
That can keep the defense honest and make them defend the whole field in big time ways.
Well, and what I'm also building up to is saying that. Remember what happened when it came to be nut cutting time and when they couldn't keep Brady clean up front. Like you've talked about extensively about Dak's struggles in the playoffs and ultimately in many of those losses being the leading and most effective rusher because they clamp down on Zeke, right? They play clog and cover on a CD or they otherwise find themselves behind after a pick six or have a guy go down and end up in a slog, one score, sub 20 point back and forth. And What's really fascinating about the opposite side of that conversation is that everybody remembers when the Patriots went and got Corey Dillon. That was much like, right, going and getting Saquon Barkley in Philly last year and really putting them over the top, taking a team that does things a certain way and then adding a star in his prime to give you that icing on the cake. And what's fascinating when you think about how this plays for some of the other teams is that, you around the league and you go, well, who's Burrow's guy? You look around the league and who's Mahomes' guy really been? And between injuries, right, and between some games that you're playing with traits, meaning physical, and also, what you're doing with the money game, with the salary cap and rolling guys in and out around all of those things that a Burrow or a Mahomes can do, Mahomes has never really had consistently since Tyreek Hill left a wide receiver one. You can look at all these other guys and say, where is the hole? Where is the challenge? And then how does that create opportunity? What the Chiefs have done is really kind of use that auspice and use that, oh, you still got a double Trav, or hey, look at Juju Smith-Schuster having a late season, late career renaissance. Who would have thought that he would have been the one to dunk the Pittsburgh Steelers out and really put them out of their misery? Is they kind of just spin it on its head, right? So what I'm wondering here is if there isn't one clear guy, what is the answer going to be? If it's a committee and that when Javonte Williams, because he's not a burst back, or Jaden Blue because he's not a big back, how are you going to kind of play those folks off of each other so that there's variance in the scheme when those guys are in the game? Defenses know what's coming.
I mean, to me, you got to be great somewhere in that situation. I think with Mahomes being paired with Reed, who's had the best screen packages of his era, and with Tom Brady being able to do what he could do in the short passing game, I think that quarterback difference was massive there. Is your screen package unbelievable? I don't think Dak's ball placement and like hitting guys on the run is good enough to play a screen game. I think that's why. So what else could you do? You could have a running quarterback, which Dak was when he first came into the league. I think that can, help offset the lack of a great individual runner. Or you could have a great offensive line, so good that he's opening up holes for you that Saquon would take to the house, and your jobber running backs are giving you somewhere between 12 and 20 yards before somebody brings them down because they lack that, open field vision and elusiveness and agility. So I just don't, I guess what I'm saying, New Bear, is I don't see the quality of line or the quality of quarterback play to think we could get away with running back by committee.
This Javonte Williams thing is going to be really, really, really interesting because he was basically, I mean, the praise on him coming out was that he was poised to become a 3-down RB1 early in his career. He had enough of all of the things. And everyone who wants to talk about him being slow, I mean, he ran 4.58. I mean, Miles Sanders was only a 4.49. It's not like Miles Sanders is Jaden Blue or a track guy out there, even though Javonte Williams was a 4x100 relay high school champion. There was so much to love about him, too, because he was like the high school valedictorian. He was just this great kid who stayed home and made his home school good. There was so much to root for. And then the knee, holy cow. And like we talked about with Diggs, yesterday, and what it really takes to come back from some of those types of injuries when there's complications and it's multiple ligaments and ligaments plus cartilage and all those things. What's really encouraging about Williams is that he's saying now, I finally feel like myself. What you're hearing about Blue is nothing because you're just seeing him put in the work and do really cool stuff out on the field.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, Miles Sanders is starting to have, D4K looking bodybuilder pictures pop up in the timeline.
Yeah.
And I think what you got to be really excited about too is Phil Mafah's talking about wanting to be the toughest, nastiest guy out there. He was a guy who came to Clemson and didn't run to his size. He had to learn how to be a power back and take some beatings to get there. What all this tells me is that you got 4 guys who are going to be competing their asses off. And whatever we're looking at, whether it's a running back by committee or we get a bell cow out of this, whoever wins is going to have earned it.
Yes, and I hope they're good enough to be somewhat resembling a difference maker. And we'll take a look at like who the most likely option is on that. I wanted to dive just a little bit deeper with you, New Bear, into why did the Cowboys think they should move on from Rico Dowdle? And Cowboys Wire did a great story here. And there's quite a few takeaways in here, but I think the biggest one is here. They get down to the rushing EPA and stuff like this. Dallas finished with the 7th worst rushing EPA per play. That's expected points added, and that's really bad. So I was wondering why did they think that Rico Dowdle wasn't good enough? Because we've talked about how they had the 6th highest run play success rate. So I think that's getting 4 or 5 yards, on first or second down. So they were able to do that, which suggests that maybe somebody with some better vision getting through that second level or better jets, better tackle breaking ability. So I saw that, why you would want to move on. I guess I just am kind of dumbfounded why it would end up being Miles Sanders. But what we have, New Bear, really is it comes down to 2 things that are true. Teams that are running the ball are winning. The Eagles and Commanders ran their way to the NFC title game. The Eagles end up just embarrassing the Chiefs, who nobody can get through in the AFC in the playoffs. 5 of the 8 divisional round teams had top 10 rushing attacks in the entire league. But only the Lions used a first rounder on a running back that got them there. Everybody else either got it later in the draft or they threw money at it, as was the case with Saquon Barkley. And I don't know if you want your team doing that. I think if you're close and you don't have any holes and you're like, dang it, we got to win the Super Bowl right now, Saquon Barkley makes a lot of sense. But like, what is the ideal way of approaching this? You don't need to draft a running back high or overpay to get one. There's plenty of teams out there that aren't in the top 5 running back paid and aren't using first rounders. But let me throw one more stat at you, New Bear. And here's why I led in with that tease that the Cowboys haven't drafted a running back inside the first 2 days since Zeke, right? 2016 first rounder. Since then, it's been 4th rounder later. 80% of the best fantasy running backs, your top producers, are taken in the first 3 rounds. I mean, you don't have to go round 1, but I think going beyond round 3, as the Cowboys did once again this year with Jaden Blue, it kind of turns it into a long shot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so tough is it's such an impactful position, and I mean that double entendre. Javonte Williams, for example, his big bugaboo coming out, even though he only had like 365 carries in college, and everyone was talking about how much tread he had on the tires, was that the bullet point was that the way he runs, his physical running style, will likely add up to wear and tear, and maybe even unnecessarily so, inside of a season or inside of a truncated career, because he had a little bit of Earl Campbell in him, right? And you look at a guy like Breece Hall, who you come back to and running away with AP Rookie of the Year honors, probably in the running for Offensive Player of the Year as a rookie before his knee went. And you couldn't question the pick based on how he was taking off as a rookie and really dominating behind a bad offensive line and dominating with subpar quarterback play. Saquon Barkley was so special in New York when healthy, with all the limitations around him. The truly special ones, you can really take the risk. But beyond that, every year we see this great debate from Omari and Hampton to Jarquez Hunter, whoever the case may be, rounds 2, 3, and 4. Not because everyone's trying to find the next Terrell Davis in round 6, but because they're all battling for those guys, because nobody wants to spend first-round money on one. Everyone believes or thinks they're smarter than the next guy, and they can find their scheme-fit specific dude who falls for whatever reason. And then, you have these guys who can just kind of do battle on these much, much lower contracts and fill a lot of other holes on your roster, right? And, Sean McVay is probably doing as good of a job as anybody. And when you look at the Rams and you think about running backs, you think about guys like Eric Dickerson, you think about guys Steven Jackson, you think about Todd Gurley, and the thing that they all have in common is where their pedigree was as high draft picks, but also guys, in particular with Gurley, who he's still something like, what is he, 5th in touchdowns since like 2016, and he hasn't played in 3 years. That's how special that was, and that's also how much
he had 21 year, didn't he?
Yeah, and that's how much of a supernova he was too, right? And then the career's over, and he was a guy, he had a knee in college as well. And you look at these guys and the 3.3 average shelf life, for all players, with running backs, it's literally one cut. It's literally one time the sniper gets you, and that could be all she wrote. So it's a fascinating thing to look at someone as talented as a Breece Hall and how much he struggled to come back with the limitations around him. And then that's why it's so rewarding to see a guy that was invested in so highly, really taken for granted, and then kind of given the keys to the castle like Saquon was last year.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you see it, and there's no doubt Philly got a huge advantage from what Saquon Barkley was able to do, breaking games open and allowing them to play a very conservative offensive style and turn that defense loose to do their work. I mean, they really had it on easy mode, and I think a lot of Cowboys fans are desperate to see this team have that level of dominance. The reason this article from Cowboys Wire was so good, though, they went on into, talking about how it's not just running it more. And I think sometimes I fall into that trap of oversimplifying it. Hey, just run the ball more. We got to take pressure off Dak, but you have to do it well. And I don't know that the Cowboys have enough to expect that this year. Maybe this is a slow rebuild, and they plan to have this offensive line mature and then drop a 21-year-old running back who spent 3 years in college on top of it to be like the cherry on top when this thing is really ready to pop. I would look at it like, man, how many great years of Dak do we have left, if any? And how long are we going to keep George Pickens around? Like this right here is the opportunity if you're thinking about a Cowboys championship window. And the reason the run game is so important is you need the chunk plays. And I feel like right now the book is out on the Cowboys. The book's out on most of the league, right? Go into a cover 2 shell and just dare them to run the ball against you and dare them to try to make 6 or 7 first downs all the way. I like the bend but don't break defensive philosophy, New Bear, that's been popular at times in our entire lifetime, is actually the current meta of the NFL. And the teams that are able to just put their heads down and plow through it, are the ones that are having the most success, aren't they? Like that's what we're seeing is teams have gotten so good at scheming it and covering it and finding the speed guys that can take away your chunk plays. Like chunk plays are down in the NFL, and the only way to get them out of it is to run. A lot of defenses will refuse to come out of it and let you keep running. So damn it, you better have a great running game. Until further notice. And how long is it going to take? I don't know. Maybe the next 3 to 4 years. Maybe it's going to take 7 or 8 years before offenses figure out a way to get them out of these defenses.
Seven teams last year. 7 teams averaged over 140 yards rushing a game. Only 3 the year before. And that's the thing that you're talking about is, maybe it takes 3 years. I just want to build on that because of how cyclical things are. Everyone's about how much of a copycat league it is. Like, let's see what Ben Johnson looks like in Chicago with Caleb Williams instead of Jared Goff and with a retooled, free agency offensive line versus the one they built from the inside out through the draft in Detroit. And without Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown, don't get me wrong, DJ Moore is a hell of a player. And Caleb Williams has better physical traits than Jared Goff would ever dream about, is what most people would say. They still got to do it on the field, and he's still got to not lose his mind like he already has because of Luther Burden III's hamstring at a random Tuesday press conference. It's a different deal being the CEO. And I think that's one of the things that's going to be really interesting to see about Schottenheimer this year, right, is this is his real shot because he's rearranging the locker room, playing musical chairs, king of summer vibes, all this good juju. And he's also got some built-in reasons, and they're not excuses because ACL tears are not excuses. When you're regrowing a knee in a petri dish, that's a reason. And that's why, they need to give Diggs as much time as he needs to really. So there's things that are built into this, but there's also the story that I know you want to push this into, which is, one Tyler helping another, which is one offensive lineman saying, hey, buddy, I want you to be better than me because you have physical traits that I just don't. And if you can put it all together, and I think that's really where this conversation has to go, because we can talk about what Javonte Williams may or may not be, what Miles Sanders may have left in the tank, if Jaden Blue's an every down backer, if he's more in that supplementary work done, Alvin Kamara, which, let's be honest. Alvin Kamara is a super duper star. That dude is a fringe Hall of Famer. And you want to talk about like fantasy fever. He's a guy that even if you don't want anything to do with the Saints, you know who Alvin Kamara is. You love him. You look him up and you go, damn, this dude's been playing for that long and he's been balling the whole time. He's one of those guys. And I think this has to come back to a conversation about the offensive line. I think it really has to come back to, is Guyton the guy? And are those 3 first-round picks capable of, because to your point, Shanahan's system, and when you talk about Christian McCaffrey goes down, Niners still run the ball. Terrell Davis goes down, Denver Broncos still run the ball. Denver Broncos can't stop anyone on defense. Jay Cutler's throwing the ball around the yard, arguing over who can say less cuss words in a clip with Phillip Rivers. Denver Broncos still running the ball. And that's the answer.
And that's from the offensive line. That's because your offensive line is so versed in it, and the backups know exactly where the holes are going to be. You can build that if you have an emphasis on making sure you have a good running game. If you're just leaving it to chance, I think like the Cowboys have. Then you get what you invest in, you get what you emphasize. But here's the story you were referring to, New Bear. Pro Football Focus put the Cowboys line 23rd best in the NFL. Considered a team strength not long ago, the Cowboys offensive line is full of question marks. Guyton's rookie season.
The last time we talked about this, they were right in the middle. Now these rankings are pushing them down from week to week. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think those were Warren Sharp's rankings. He had him 16th. I thought that was low. And then we get to this week. The Cowboys are 23rd on Pro Football Focus as they're rolling out all their position group rankings as we count down to camp. The good news is the Commanders are 19th and the Giants are like almost dead last, but the Eagles are sitting at number 1. Like somebody asked me in our comments on a different video, what do you think Dak needs to win? And I'm like, well, how about a line as good as the Eagles? How about a running back as good as the Eagles? And how about 2 wide receivers as good as the Eagles? And right now, all you have is the 2 wide receivers, so you're basically tasking Dak to go out there and accomplish what no other quarterbacks are doing in the NFL. And this is the proof right here. The Eagles have the best running back, the best offensive line, and the best wide receivers, according to Pro Football Focus, New Bear.
Yeah, what a model franchise they've become. But let's not forget, it's an odd year. So by week 6, Sirianni will be on the hot seat, and there's going to be some crazy shit that's going to happen in Philadelphia. But, all kidding aside, you look at them and they just wait they let the draft board fall to them, and then they take the best Alabama or Georgia defensive player available, right? They double dip and they go get 2 corners in the same draft. that dramatically had a huge impact, changed the whole trajectory of that defense when DeJean comes off the bench and really just starts rocking last year. And you've said this a few different times, a few different ways, but the exclamation point is that when you're able to do that and fill in all those gaps, then you can go pay Saquon what they're paying Saquon. Because he's the icing on the cake. He's literally the thing. Derrick Henry maybe took less money, but Derrick Henry also wanted to play in that system and wanted to play with Lamar. And I mean, Derrick Henry is a guy, you want to talk about special people. What do you have? He had like 1,400 carries in high school. Have you ever looked up he had like 462 carries as a senior, and you go, oh wow, yeah, man, and then he had 313, I think, as a sophomore and a junior and a freshman.
I thought he was going to wear down so quickly. I thought
Alabama.
Henry, yeah. I mean, he doesn't have a great first step. Like the first 10 yards of his 40 are very average to below average. I thought there's no way this guy's going to have success, but he's special.
Yeah, and there's so many different types of runners, right? And when you look at Javonte Smith, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, Phil Mafah, there are 4 different types of runners. And so
let me jump in here and share screen and sort of turn the page on this discussion, because ESPN did rank. They got together all their executives and their anonymous sources and scouts and coaches and stuff. They ranked the top 10 running backs. And you got Saquon. We'll get through the top 10, obviously, no Cowboys. You'll get through the 5 honorable mentions, no Cowboys. You'll get the 7 other running backs who are also receiving votes, no Cowboys. So you don't have one of the top 22 guys. And, I think that's very relevant here, New Bear, for what we're talking about, because we're hoping one of these dudes can jump up and either turn the clock back, as the case of Miles Sanders, or find the magical healing of his knee for Javonte Williams, but Jaden Blue. But yeah, I wanted to get to Phil Mafah there. Other than that, Deuce Vaughn and Hunter Lipke. I know somebody will mention those guys in the comments. We love talking football with you in the comments, by the way. So please like the video and sub and do all that. But I mean, those guys have no shot. I don't know how much better Jaden Blue and Phil Mafah are. By the way, not even Rico Dowdle in the top 22, not Tony Pollard in the top 22, who did really have the misfortune of suffering an injury that took away all of his explosiveness. He didn't even hit 19 miles an hour more than 4 times in his final season with the Cowboys, after doing that on a near weekly basis, before the injury. But anyway, I said all this to get us on the topic of Phil Mafah. Could he be a guy? I saw a Cowboys channel comp him to James Conner. Honestly, I think that's a pretty homerish take, until we at least see Mafah go out there and have a successful month. I think that is hopeful at best. But, I mean, the measurables are pretty insane. Like everything you could measure on a human body, Phil Mafah is almost identical to James Conner: height, weight, arm length, hand size, all those kind of stuff. But James Conner, for being an overachiever, he did one thing elite at Pitt, New Bear, and you know this. He broke tackles, and he was an absolute machine at doing that. And Phil Mafah could carve out a role, but I don't know if he has the agility or the ability to break tackles that a James Conner did for that comp to really apply.
Can we just reset this conversation and do one little thing? Give me height, give me weight, give me arm length, hand size, 40 times 10-yard split. James Conner went through training camp with the colostomy bag in his pants. The dude beat cancer and whipped that ass in football. I mean, when you look at his college stats and his pro stats, and we talk about, I know we're projecting right now, but let's just not forget that, James Conner was him. I mean, James Conner was like a 26 touchdown, 1,800 yard, do everything guy who then got cancer, came back, and is now a multi-time Pro Bowl, multi-time 1,000-yard, entering, the decayed part of his career where he's still being doubted. He's still holding off top drafted running backs that have been picked to replace him because he's too old. He's too much tread on the tires. He's had the ankle in particular. He's a dog, man. If Phil Mafah puts himself in a position where 8 or 10 years from now, we're comparing him to James Conner, Cowboys win a Super Bowl. Cowboys might win 2 Super Bowls.
I didn't want to name the channel that I saw it on because I felt like it was such a bad take. But I did want to bring it up. Like, does Phil Mafah actually have the best chance out of these four guys of being the every down back? Like, even though that analogy sucks and it's disrespectful to James Conner.
Oh, out of these four, so if you were talking, if you were talking about a healthy Javonte Williams, he's just so much smaller.
And let me show you this picture before you answer totally. There's Miles Sanders.
Yeah, but him. Miles Sanders is like 5'10", 210. Javonte Williams like 5'11", 215, 220. I mean, I think he's pretty trim right now too, trying not to play at that bigger weight that he was before. I mean, Miles Sanders getting every ounce out of what, the good Lord gave him, and he looks fantastic. And I honestly hope that he is able to get back to that Eagles form, because if you drafted him even after the first bad year in Carolina, you said, well, it's Carolina, it's still Miles Sanders, you're going to trust the traits in the previous production. But he was no bueno. But nobody was any bueno in Carolina for the past couple of years until people talk about homer takes where people are talking about how all of a sudden Bryce Young's going to turn into the second coming of insert your favorite comeback story at 5'11", 175-pound Sunday quarterbacks. But like going back to the Mafah thing of this group, just strictly because of the size. I mean, none of the other backs have the size and that physical trait where Javonte wanted to be and probably was going to project to play like that and was playing like that. But what they talked about with Javonte Williams was what you talk about with Emmitt Smith, and that's why I think everybody thought he was going to be such a great pro. Vision, contact balance. And he had enough pep to get through, particularly scheme specific. Like, you didn't want to ask him to be a long outside zone read and one cut guy. You wanted to give him a track to get on, and then he would hug that track tightly and maximize everything that was there and then put his head down.
My issue with Javonte is, New Bear, address this. The Broncos have one of the best offensive lines in football, and he's under 4 an attempt.
Yeah, so he looked like he was done. He looked completely washed. And I also, the thing I think about in Denver, until Bo Nix really turned the corner, people were wondering if Sean Payton had lost it because of how things went with Russ and because of kind of where that roster was in transition. And then Bo Nix is able to make that leap, and look what that does. Look how much other stuff that makes right. What's going to be really interesting to see about Sean Payton, Bo Nix, Denver this year is if there's any kind of CJ Stroud. Same thing with Jaden Daniels. What happens in that sophomore slump setup? And I love Bo Nix because I just love his story, and I hated how things went for him at Auburn. But I'm not an Oregon guy, but I was rooting for him at Oregon just because of who he was and what he was set up to do in SEC country. Bringing this back to Javonte Williams and the Cowboys, I think you cannot underestimate doubt. You cannot underestimate when everyone is one of one, when everyone is like 1% of the 1%, and you don't physically feel right and you're doubting that. Part of this, you have to wonder, is this Javonte Williams trying to psych himself up into one more shot, or does he really finally feel right? This is the same conversation we're going to have about Trayvon Diggs until he decides to lace him up.
I probably have more respect for Sean Payton's evaluations of the offensive backfield than anybody in the entire league. If Sean Payton has moved on from you, like, that's the biggest long shot to me, New Bear. I think he's in there to pass pro while they make sure Guyton's okay and Booker transitions well to the NFL. So for me, I think Javonte Williams, if I was going to rank the 4, I would put him dead last. And then I'd put Jaden Blue. I think Jaden Blue has a chance to lead the running back room in touchdowns. He probably will. But as far as being a consistent, hey, we might give this guy the ball 25 or 30 times today, and I guarantee the plan's to give it to him at least 16 to 20. Who's that guy? I think Miles Sanders is probably the most likely, just because everybody else is so unproven. Phil Mafah is number 2, then Blue, then Javonte Williams. How would you rank those 4?
Yeah, it's real funny. I was just thinking, I think so very badly, because I just love comeback stories. I love good stories. I want to live in a world where, good dudes, good people, good kids. He's still a kid, get rewarded for what they put into it. And, McLaughlin was like 4.4. Estime was like 4.1. And then you look at Williams and you're like, damn, he's all the way down there at 3.6, 3.7. It's hard to justify, putting him any higher than if the other 3 are healthy, dead last, to your point. The challenge is that Miles Sanders, if he is healthy, for how long? The challenge is, if Jaden Blue is hanging on to the ball for how long? The challenge is, can you rock with Phil Mafah while he's going 3 and 3 and 3 and basically be an Eddie George, right? And trying to headbang his way if they're going to be stubborn with it and then throw play action off of it. So when you're talking about 16, 18, 20, yeah, Mafah, because I don't trust Sanders over 18 weeks. If you're talking about one guy, all things considered, Sanders. If you're talking about one guy who you hope can kind of clap, it's Jaden Blue. And you're looking at him saying, well, how big is Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And if Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, I think that's the Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, the Mike Alstott, Warwick Dunn, is who are the two guys, if we're going to talk about, 400, 425, 450 carries and a 80, 90 catch tandem, who are the two guys that are going to split that load? And it's Jaden Blue. And then is it Miles Sanders and Mafah's on the practice squad and you hope you keep him? And Javonte just disappears? Because I think that's the world we're living in.
I think it's 2026 second round draft pick, fill in the blank. That's the guy along with Jaden Blue that I think might put the Cowboys skill positions back in the map, especially if they could keep George Pickens next year. How About Wow is brought to you by our friends at Elements Massage in Frisco, 2 locations, one at the Star, one on Main Street right there next to the FC Dallas Soccer Stadium. And if you call them, tell them we sent you, they got something special for you. It's also brought to you by our friends at Harbor Lights. Go to HarborEnterprisesLLC.com, or you can just click this QR code for a free consultation on permanent lighting solutions for your residence or your business. They'll also get you a quote on Christmas lights right now. You can save big with their Christmas in July special. That is our friends at Harbor Lights. And thank you to both of them for their continued support of us here on How About Wow. All right, New Bear, great stuff. Anything else to add to the conversation?
What's really the most exciting thing about this is you go from the skill guys that everyone wants to talk about. You know who they are. You know what they look like. Maybe you don't want to see what the big uglies look like when they take their shirt off. But all kidding aside, like the Guyton transformation and the Steele and Guyton, getting the reps in, BB in year 2, Booker coming in as it looks like a plug and play guy. I really feel like this conversation very quickly turns into, I know we talked, last time about how training camp has kind of lost some of its edge because it's really just, like a glorified walkthrough, and they're really not even scrimmaging. They're not banging heads. What's going to be interesting is, up front, if you're in helmet and shoulder pads, if you're strapped in, if you're laced up and you're strapped in, even if it's not what it once was, you can't fake the funk up front, right? And
No.
when you start seeing Micah squaring off against these guys and Mozzie and Solomon Thomas and some of these other big dudes running into other big dudes, what's going to be really cool to see is, what does it look like regardless of who's behind them? What does it look like when they're moving people one way or the other, where you're able to just kind of lock in and say, if Miles Sanders is healthy, this is kind of the slash game that we're running. If Jaden Blue's able to hang on the ball, this is how we're going to utilize him. And it's like cut-ups of, Detroit Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs take. And if everything goes to hell in a handbasket and Phil Mafah has to be the guy that's getting, 300 carries, 350 touches for some reason this year, then it is ground and pound, pin and pull, old school fullback. And, let's really light this thing up. And I think the interesting thing about it is those big boys up front and how quickly this conversation turns into the focus being on them.
No. All right, great stuff, New Bear. That'll do it for this time. You can get all of our socials, our written words, and our latest videos at howboutwow.com.